Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joe Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
So one of the things that we have been focusing on here at Personality Hacker with our clients and students and some of our programs, even on this podcast, I would say, is this idea of timelines. Like our belief here at Personality Hacker is that we're pre-wired with our cognitive preferences, the way we learn information and make decisions. And we think that over a lifetime, you develop aspects of yourself, but you have your basic cognitive wiring that you come with. And that looks like the car model of personality that we have in our personality owner's manuals. By the way, you should get one for your personality type. They're fantastic to frame out all the basics and then some advanced material on how to set up your life, create an ideal day for you and your personality type, and then your ergonomic life that you want. Excuse me. But this idea of timelines has come into play because a person that's a certain personality type at the age of 20 is going to go through a lot of changes in life. Yeah, they're going to have the same cognitive preferences, Antonia, but they're going to shape and shift how they use those cognitive preferences throughout a lifetime. In fact, they're going to lean on maybe some things that were challenging when they were younger. Maybe, if you look at the car model personality again from the owner's manuals, the 10-year-old, or what's technically called the tertiary cognitive function, or the inferior, technically called inferior, we call it the 3-year-old cognitive function. Well, maybe by the time you're 60 or 70, would those be like grown up? Are they still 10 and 3 as an example? So these are some questions I think a lot of our clients, students, and people that listen to this podcast have. And so timeline does play a factor into this. Mm-hmm. Where are you at in your life? Your relationship to your personality type and where you need to apply growth strategies is going to be different based on your station of life and your experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I suspect that particularly because we talk about personality primarily through the lens of growth and development.
Yeah.
I think that is even more relevant to the work that we do, is this idea of understanding what a personality type looks like on a timeline of development. And like you mentioned, and I think we've said this multiple times in the podcast, an INTJ that's 20 is going to look totally different than an INTJ at the age of 60.
Yeah.
And there's reasons for that. And like you mentioned, they're going to, the cognitive function preferences stay the same, but our relationship to those functions changes over time. So I think it's a really relevant question to ask, where should I be at right now? Yeah. Depending upon my age and my station in life and all the things that I'm, like the amount of development I've done, I might be early in my growth process. It might be something that, I've just woken up to this idea of personal growth and development. And so I'm pretty early. Where should I be at depending upon my age? And if I've been doing lots of development and growth, maybe this is something I've really dedicated my life to, where should I be at there?
Yeah.
So I think the idea of timelines and the expectations we should have for ourselves is, I think it's actually a really important question.
Yes. I mean, the brain doesn't even stop forming until 25? Like we're still forming our brain and all the aspects of who we are. So if you're under 25, you're not even a fully baked bread yet. Totally. But you still have some more brain development, right?
Yeah.
Which can be a factor in some of this. But I mean, even though that is still not finished, we do have indications of type showing up before this.
Yeah, well, because a lot of stuff is preset.
Yeah.
Like we like to believe that nurture and socialization and all that stuff, is the majority of the ingredients, but there's a lot that's predetermined. There's a lot that comes with our pre-wiring and in our genetics and DNA and that sort of thing too.
So let me zoom in here. I'm just going to bring this to a pinpoint and ask a very pointed question or direct this in a very pointed way.
Okay.
So let's assume you're watching or listening right now and you are consulting your owner's manual of personality for your specific type. We got 16 of them. You can also just go and look up personality.com/car model to understand the car model. Because really I want you to direct you to the car model. It's inside the owner's manual course for your type. But get that car model and I want you to look at your driver and your co-pilot in the car model. So it's a 4-passenger vehicle. And those are the 2 strengths that you bring to the table for your personality. But I want you now to look and pay attention to what for your personality type is your 10-year-old, technically called tertiary, or 3-year-old, technically called inferior. As you're looking at that, I'm going to ask the meta question, basically ask it to you and me, Antonia. If someone starts to focus on their car model of personality and grow, and I alluded to this earlier, and start to grow themselves over time, wouldn't it follow that the 10-year-old and the 3-year-old would grow up and mature? And maybe by the time you're 70 years old, or if you're really on accelerated maturity, track, and you're really applying yourself and focusing on growth strategies for your personality type and all of this, maybe even by midlife, by your mid 40s or 50s, those two functions are grown up. Now they're like in their 20s and 30s, right? Your 10-year-old becomes maybe a 30-year-old. Maybe it's, and your 3-year-old now is like a teenager, like late teens. And you got all the sophistication and seasoning and skill.
Should not all be sewn up.
Because the two front functions are maturing over time. So wouldn't the back functions follow as well in their skill and competence and all of this?
Yeah. So, and I think that's that's a question that is frequently asked by casual listeners of the podcast, or even people who've just recently got into the podcast. I actually think that there was recently a comment from somebody who had INTJ preferences that said, your car model, I think, is more meant for people in their 20s than maybe in their 40s and 50s.
Yeah. And
they talked about how they had, they were doing extroverted sensing things, and, that was something that they really felt like they had a handle on.
Sure.
And it was what would be called their shadow functions. That was the thing that was the place of the biggest challenge.
How old were they? Do you know?
They didn't mention. It was a comment. So I'm assuming that they're in their 40s or 50s.
So midlife, roughly?
Yeah, I would assume midlife.
Which would make sense for shadow material. That's what we talk about. Jung even talked about this.
Yes. Well, and we've said it before in the opposite direction in previous podcasts, which is you're really not ready for shadow material until you get your midlife for the most part anyway.
Yeah.
And so we've said it like to younger people, like don't really worry about shadow functions quite yet. You can be interested in them and kind of fascinated by how they work. And I think part of the reason why we say that too is there's a lot of misinformation about how shadow functions work. I think my least favorite way of people representing them is to say that you're like literally the personality type of your shadow. Like as somebody with ENTP preferences, when I go to my shadow, I would literally be an INTJ. And that's probably my least favorite misinformation about how shadow functions work.
Man, we could get you in your shadow and get so much done and set up and thought about and architected.
Yeah. Just
that's your strategic mind, your shadow there. If you're an INTJ, we need to get you in that more.
Yeah, why am I not in INTJ land more often? That would be super helpful. It's a misunderstanding of how the model works, right? It's this idea that, it's hoping that everything's tidy. And theories that are super tidy are usually more theory-like than reality, because reality is extremely messy. Yeah. And reality generally doesn't follow the rules of theories as much as we would like them to. But that said, there is something to be said for when you hit midlife, the other material starts to surface and other considerations start to surface. The functions that are in our shadow represent aspects of life that maybe we had an easier time of ignoring and neglecting when we were younger because we just didn't prioritize them since they didn't feel like us. So when we're younger, our what's technically called our egosyntonic functions, or the first 4 functions.
Car model.
Or our car model, exactly. And these are functions that we not only feel comfortable using, but we're also the ones that we think are the important things of life. That's why they're called preferences. Like we prefer them. We prefer them not just to use them, but we prefer the things that they tend to focus on. And so our preferences also set our values oftentimes. And so what we'll do is we'll say, I'm not good at that other thing and it doesn't matter anyway because that thing's not important. Only the things that I'm pre-wired to focus on are the important things. And everybody who's focusing on all the other stuff, well, I mean, I guess they're just, I don't know. We tend to think of them as inferior specimens or people who are like handling boring stuff that we don't want to think about. By the time we get to midlife, those like the lack of those aspects of ourselves we start to feel the pain of them. It's less easy to push them away and go, oh, it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah.
Like it's, you get to a certain point and if you haven't figured this aspect of yourself out, you're going to have lots of pieces of evidence throughout the decades of your adulthood to go, well, maybe I should be figuring it out. You're starting to actually feel the pain of them. So that's one of the reasons why quote unquote shadow functions really start to become relevant to us in midlife. Now, just because they're relevant doesn't mean we're actually doing something about them. We might be paying attention to those aspects of life. We might be going, oh, I wish I had more of that. But we have a choice, and we've mentioned this in previous episodes. It's almost like midlife gives us a fork in the road and says, okay, so are you going to double down on what you've already been doing, or are you going to go ahead and go through the pain of feeling like you are regressing by starting to develop a relationship with aspects of yourself that are inconveniently uncomfortable and difficult to do, way more difficult than your preferred functions. So are you willing to take that feeling of regression or a beginner's mind, really? And if we say yes, then we have the opportunity to find what Carl Jung would call whole self, which is all the aspects of ourselves that both live in our ego, but then outside of our ego or our unconscious. Or we can say, no, I'm going to double down. And then we become what's called one-sided. And we just become, like a cardboard cutout version of ourselves. So going back to the point of origin, though, is does it mean that our 10-year-old and 3-year-old in the car model never develop and grow, right? Do they just stay static, or should we expect as egosyntonic functions, as functions that we've been using our whole life and have a relationship to, that we should expect them to age also and become older and older?
Yeah.
So the way that we used to talk about our car model, I would say yes. Like how we talk about the car model in years before, I would say, yes, you should expect them to age a little bit older than 10 and 3 and to become more mature than that.
Because we at the time tied them to competence and development.
Yeah.
Like if I have ENFP preferences, if I work a job for 30 years that requires me to focus on my inferior or 3-year-old process of introverted sensing or memory, I do that for 3 decades, I'm going to build some skill there. I'm going to develop that part of myself, and I'm going to have some capacity I didn't have 30 years before.
Yep.
Right. And everybody would have that available to them. So we used to talk about it in a growth frame of competence and skill and attunement to being able to perform with these functions.
Yeah. We used to call it sophistication.
Yes.
Right. It's like these are varying levels of sophistication.
And in that framework, you can grow and develop a little bit.
Yeah. And should. And if you're not, get on that.
And sometimes it's not doing things too.
Yeah.
It's not just building skill to do things. It's also stop doing things and knowing when to and when not to, discretion, judgment, all these things come into that.
All the things. That's right. All those things come into it. And so that's part of what sophistication is. Sophistication is another way of saying maturing. And so your 10-year-old and 3-year-old or your tertiary and inferior functions, they should be becoming more sophisticated in their use and their discretion over time. But in the way we're talking about the car model now, I don't think they age beyond 3 and 10. I actually think that that's the key to the whole operation, is understanding how they stay 10 and 3 years old for basically for our whole lives.
Which explains so much confusion and frustration inside of personality types, because you're like, I'm better at this than I'm experiencing here. Yeah. So if we're not talking about competence, skill building, capacity,
or sophistication,
we are tying it to something very specific.
Yes. And that would be certainty. We never age out of feeling uncertain in those functions. And we've done entire podcasts on this topic before. I think it was personality types and certainty or uncertainty. And the concept or the conversation or a conversation around the idea of certainty all by itself, I think deserves its own, it's its own conversation all by itself. Because the one thing I'm starting to realize is as humans, we hate uncertainty.
We'll take almost anything over that.
Yeah.
We'll take poverty, suffering, pain, death, opposition, discord, broken relationships, broken career, as long as we know it's certain.
Yeah.
Like we'd rather take something bad that we're certain of than something good that's speculative.
Yeah. And you see this by people like sort of repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again because we prefer the familiar.
Yeah.
It's like what do they call it? The devil,
I'm the same way, man. I can't get away from it.
Yeah. Right.
I can't escape this.
Exactly. Well, and okay, that's because you're human, right?
Yeah.
All humans
so frustrating.
Crave certainty. And it appears as if certain personality types are more pre-wired for certainty than others because where they feel certain is observable to the outside world. It's a sense of certainty in functions that are more interfacing. But all of us, I mean, I would argue that this might be, from my perspective, it might actually be sort of the key, the nucleus of what type is. Type is a descending order of certainty based on your preferred cognitive functions, meaning that we are all the most certain in our first or our dominant or what we call the driver function. We are all the most certain in that function. That's what makes it our dominant function. Because when you feel a sense of certainty, you don't throttle yourself. There's no pause. There's no like, maybe I shouldn't do this. The more certain you feel, the more you're just going to jump ahead. And in any arena or element of life that you just plow ahead in, right? You just jump in first and ask questions later. You're going to gain a lot more experience. You're going to gain a lot more variety of lessons that help you mold and craft and create distinctions and get nuance. Like any area of certainty that we experience, we're going to actually gain even more certainty in it.
Yeah.
Because we're going to learn how to use it as a tool. And that's what makes it our dominant or driver function. And you can see this, even when people are wildly wrong in their first function, they still feel a sense of certainty.
Yeah.
And to me, one of the best ways to see this is to try to insult somebody in their first function. You can't do it. Now, you can reject a person's first function, meaning that you can say, it's dumb to be a person who does this thing, and I reject it, and a person can get their feelings hurt. But you can't insult their use of it.
Yeah.
And you can try it. Try to talk to anybody. Try to talk to an EFJ and say that they're bad with people. Talk to an INJ and say that they are, they're bad at understanding how people think, or that they're really terrible at, discovering meaning or understanding the deeper component of something. Talk to an ESP and ask them if that they feel a sense of uncertainty in their body or into their place, in the moment. It just can't be done.
Yeah.
And so the first function is a place of very high certainty.
Well, we do tell our students and clients this, people we work with. If you feel uncertain there, that's a massive red flag. Mm-hmm. That means you should definitely pay attention to that piece of information.
Right.
It happens rarely. But there are moments when you do feel uncertain at some of the most sophisticated parts of us, the driver, the co-pilot.
Right.
Dominant, auxiliary. But you don't live there, and that's very rare when it happens. And it's something you usually pay attention to. You can remember those moments. You're like, I remember when I felt uncertain in this aspect because it's so profound.
Exactly. Now I can just see some IFP being like, I feel uncertain about my relationship to myself or uncertain about certain aspects.
Sure.
But it's not usually the function itself that you're feeling uncertainty in. Every IFP knows themselves.
Yeah.
Right. The phrase, I know myself enough to blah, blah, ... That I don't know an FP that hasn't used that phrase around me. I know myself. Right. And so there's a high sense of certainty. Why are you laughing?
Because it drives you crazy when I say that. I know myself and this is going to happen. You're like, I hate when you say that. I hate when you say you know yourself. I don't remember why you said you hate that. That's why I was laughing.
Well, because it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, but that doesn't mean that it means you don't do the thing, right? You still have to do the thing sometimes. And
no
sometimes,
get out of jail free card, Joel.
Yeah, just because you know yourself. Well, of course, that's also my that's my bias showing up as somebody who does not have introverted feeling or authenticity as a preferred function.
That's why I was smiling.
Yeah. And so thank you for explaining. So the first function is the function of the most certainty. And then we've done a whole podcast on this. It goes in descending order. By the time you get to the 3-year-old or inferior function, you're now in a place of deep uncertainty. And I don't think that we ever grow out of that. I think we always feel deep uncertainty when we get to our inferior function. So here's there's a real nuance here. Okay. I'm gonna go into something that has a lot of distinction in it, and it's kind of hard to grasp. So, or not hard to grasp, but it might be hard to articulate. So if it's not understood on the first try, it might be me. It might be the person communicating and not you, the listener, trying to wrap your head around it. And so I will do my best to communicate it. But here's the distinction. The only way to truly form a solid relationship to your 3-year-old or inferior function is to not get over the feeling of uncertainty that is generated when you're in that function. It's to make peace with the feeling of uncertainty until you get to a point that you're not registering it as a red flag.
So you're expanding your comfort zone in a way.
Right.
Of what you can tolerate.
Yes.
It's really about tolerance. I can tolerate ever increasing levels of uncertainty to be able to function here in this part of my personality.
That's right. Exactly.
And I think the 10-year-old, it would be similar. Maybe not as severe as the 3-year-old, but probably a very similar relationship.
Yes. Now, there's a big distinction between the 10-year-old and the 3-year-old, or the tertiary and inferior. And that is when you look at the model that Dr. John Beebe has put forth, which is what I'm referring to a lot and actually it was John's work in coaching with John that helped me understand that certainty and uncertainty was really what it comes down to. And this is something I've had conversations with him about. And I'm like, does this track? And he's like, yeah. No. And he gave me gold stars for the idea. So I'm like, I feel like I had it ratified by John himself, Dr. John Beebe. So because John ratified it, I'm like, okay, I'm onto something. So I feel like this is probably, this isn't just, this is not something I think I'm just pulling out of my ass here. I think that there's like legit something here. And so making peace with uncertainty, or as you just mentioned, expanding your comfort zone to include uncertainty. Well, uncertainty is by definition uncomfortable. So how does one expand one's comfort zone to include uncertainty? And I would say in the same way that you expand your threshold for pain, so that pain is still happening, but you're not registering it as something that stops you. Mm-hmm. So when you're expanding your quote unquote comfort zone or your tolerance zone of uncertainty, you're still experiencing uncertainty. You're just not letting it stop you.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
And that's the key to truly quote unquote developing, or I would say integrating the inferior or 3-year-old function.
Yes.
Now, I said there was a distinction here between the 10-year-old and 3-year-old, or what we could call the tertiary and inferior. So the reason why, and the other thing, I think the person mentioned in their comment, and not that this entire podcast is necessarily like an answer to that comment, but it helps me sort of keep track of
frame it
and kind of understand the confusion around it.
Totally makes sense.
So Dr. John Beebe assigns the archetypal energy of an eternal child to the tertiary function. It's part of why we call it a 10-year-old. And that doesn't mean that we're not, again, that we can't become quite skilled in it.
Yeah.
But it's always going to have the energy of eternal child, or the certainty level of an eternal child energy.
Yes.
And that's relevant because if you start to study children and ask yourself, what does a 10-year-old do when they feel uncertain? And the answer is they go look for an adult to comfort them and make them feel more certain.
Or something in the outside world.
That's right.
Something familiar.
Right.
That they know.
Yeah.
That they can latch on to. Usually it's an adult, but it could be something else familiar, like a place they know, something that they know that they can go and get respite from.
Yeah, exactly. Like I guess there are some self-soothing coping mechanisms that they can employ, but it doesn't make them feel more certain about the topic. It just makes them not feel like not to continue to be disturbed by a feeling of uncertainty. Yeah. It's really a distraction technique.
Yeah.
So 10-year-olds either distract themselves away from the feeling, or they go seek somebody else, an authority figure, to tell them that it's going to be okay.
Yep.
And that's what we do too. Like there are tertiary function. It's always going to feel a little uncertain. And its instinct is to go seek outer world approval or feedback or whatever to calm us down and go, okay, it's going to be okay. I'm doing a good enough job here. Or the alternative is to go distract ourselves, which is oftentimes what we do. All right. So if you look at your 10-year-old or tertiary function in your car model for whatever your personality type is, and even if it's an introverted function, oftentimes what you're doing is you're looking to the outside world to give you the feedback that you are doing a good enough job and it's okay. And if you don't get that feedback, like a 10-year-old, you will use or employ a coping mechanism to make it okay. And so that can be either distraction, so you just stop thinking about it, or you say something like, well, I don't care what they think anyway, right? We went and sought the feedback. We went and sought the comfort. We didn't receive the comfort. And now we're like, well, it's stupid anyway, right? Yeah. And so we dismiss it. And this can happen with like the introverted judging functions, introverted feeling and introverted thinking, which are like what IJs all use as their 10-year-old or tertiary. I could see particularly like introverted feeling or authenticity that ITJs use. Lots of ITJs feel just really misunderstood, like just really misunderstood.
Well, they have false, I think a lot of ITJs are frustrated that people project ill intent onto them. But that misunderstanding is very specific. It's like they feel like people are reading their intent terribly wrong. and assuming wildly things that they don't intend to project outwardly.
Yeah, that's definitely the most common, but there's also a slew of like, are my feelings wrong? Is it okay for me to be this way?
Enough, yeah.
Am I allowed to be like maybe really introverted? Am I allowed to be the kind of person that is really introverted? Or am I allowed to be the kind of person who has these values? Or am I allowed, it's all back to like, or do I really know myself well enough? Or am I allowed to be the kind of person that I am? Am I allowed to kind of stick to my guns and say, I don't have to change to suit the world? Or am I supposed to be changing and meeting the world halfway? And there's a lot of uncertainty around that. So then the ITJ will go to seek outer world, like maybe it might not be a person, like you said, it might just be in the environment, but that usually looks like research or articles on the topic, or, like, am I supposed to, or just go to, to social media and make some sort of aggressive comments that make them feel like they have a sense of assertiveness or whatever it is, right? Like whatever the strategy is to make it so that it's okay for them to have a little uncertainty in this part of themselves and then interact with the outside world, and the outside world somehow reflects back that their position is okay. That's what they're ultimately seeking. All of us are doing this with our 10-year-old or tertiary. We are trying to get the outer world to tell us that it is okay for us to be fill in the blank in whatever way. Like for me, with using extroverted feeling or harmony, I mean, my uncertainty is always, am I serving people? Am I saying the right thing so that people can receive it and understand it and it will impact them in a positive way? Is my house clean enough, right? Like, are people going to judge me?
Yeah.
Right? Are the neighbors looking at my grass is a little too long? Like, I'm like, it's all these extroverted feeling harmony considerations. And I have to remind myself, like, I'm never going to have the instinct of going, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
I'm always going to be like, is it okay? And then of course, we've talked about it in previous episodes. The healthiest thing we can do is attach that eternal child questioning to our inner parent, or our parent energy of the co-pilot or auxiliary, to be the soothing voice to the eternal child. Meaning that when my extroverted feeling or harmony gets really uncertain, I can ask outer world feedback to calm me down, or my introverted thinking or accuracy can go, well, actually, it's probably going to be okay because of these reasons, right?
Yes.
If I'm not so in my like ego and fear around people's impression of me, my introverted thinking accuracy can take a step back and kind of go, it's fine. I've worked it out. I've worked the math out and it's going to be fine.
You know what's coming up for me right now? This is a very intuitive thing that's coming up for me is, and it actually is based on something you said earlier, as you were talking about, as we're talking about this all together, if you listen to our podcast from 10 years ago, we're way more certain on those podcasts.
Yeah.
What's coming up for me is, as you grow and develop and mature, I'm more actually, I don't think it's uncertain. I think it's different. It's like I'm less assertive and I'm less definitive. Like the advice I used to give on this podcast 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, was like and same thing for you. It was more assertive, more definitive. Now it's like, well, it kind of depends. I mean, it's sort of like, it almost like feels like we hem and haw more now.
Yeah.
Like now that I've got all this experience coaching and guiding people and workshops, the more I do it, the less I would say certain, quote unquote, certain.
Yeah.
But I'm much more careful to be, it's not certainty. It's like definitive. Like this is how that function works for that personality type. Like I'm very like, it depends. Even this whole conversation about timelines right now, right? That's where we started with this. This is timelines of like maturity and growth. And the further I go on this timeline and I do it, I'm like, everything is contextual. It's really hard and so it's actually hard as a business because the very thing we started off this conversation saying people love certainty. Well, if you're not doing a podcast and you're landing things with incredible, definitive, assertive, absolutely, this is how this works. People are like, well, they must not know what they're talking about because that other person over there on the internet says this, and they're very clear about it and defined it really, I just can't do that. It just doesn't work that way for me. Yeah.
I think that people would prefer the wrong thing said with certainty than the right thing said with a little bit of hedging, a little bit of sort of contextualization, and
so it's a balance. It's a balance, but I think the maturity on the timeline, you probably are going to be less definitive about how things work in life as you grow. Even your two front functions, your driver and your co-pilot, you're going to have a lot of experience there, but you're going to know when they don't work for you. You're going to know when the rules can be broken or when things are not going to actually play out the way the quote theory says it.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's uncertainty. I was thinking that's in the same theme of but I think that's assertiveness and definitive thinking.
Yeah. Well, to go down that sort of that, because that's a little bit of a sidetrack, but that's
we can come back into it.
No, I'm tagging the primary, I'm tagging the conversation, and I'll get us back there, I think. But to go off on this tangent, which I think is actually an important tangent, is in a situation where somebody just wants people to say things with certainty.
Yeah.
It's usually because that person is trying to borrow it.
Yeah.
Like, because we don't like certainty, but we're not sure how to manufacture it for ourselves. And we don't know that our job is not to become more certain about everything, but rather to make peace with things that we are always going to feel uncertain about.
Yeah.
Then we're trying to borrow it from others. And when somebody that we follow, right, somebody who's an influencer or content creator or whatever says things like, this is how it is and it's absolute, and particularly when it comes to something as theoretical as type.
Yeah.
It's like so theoretical. The more certain the voice, the more you're trying to borrow that certainty about the topic yourself.
Yes.
And when a person is a little less certain, like this is absolutely how it works in all ways, they're a little more like, well, it's kind of contextual and it sort of depends. And particularly when it comes to this kind of content, because we're talking about every human being that's ever lived in every situation they've ever been in.
With every technology that's ever existed.
Yeah.
With every type of context possible. As
if the theory can explain it all in like a single answer.
Yeah.
Right. Like all INFJs ... in every situation, in every moment of the timeline, in every developmental ever, in every like there's like type that's a bridge too far, right?
Yes.
We're asking something from type that it can't possibly give us. But we are looking for that because then that means we have the answer, and having the answer, that means I have a sense of certainty. And I think this might be one of the things that at least Jungian analysts aren't super keen on when it comes to personality type theory. And maybe Jung himself, this might be one of the reasons why he didn't like it very much, because he wasn't a big fan.
Yeah.
Might be because it potentially offers answers that are not answers. They're soothing, they're like security blankets.
Yeah.
It's like, this is the silver bullet answer to all things in this way. And it's like, well, that's not really how that works. Yeah.
So talking about timelines then, that's often where people are starting, and that's totally appropriate. If you're new, type can explain so many things definitively at the early stages of coming into this, that it can be useful in that more, this is how it works. No, don't worry about that. This is, if you got this function as a co-pilot, grow it this way.
Yeah.
It's like, that's the good advice for that part of the timeline. I guess what I'm trying to say here, if I take a step back, go back to the entire framework of this entire conversation, which is about timelines. We've dipped into certainty so much. We've talked about certainty in other episodes, and that's where the conversation goes. But ultimately, on a timeline, you're going to need to hear things a little more definitively when you're younger, or when you're starting out in your journey of type or understanding the self. You're just trying to understand. It's like you talk about this all the time, coloring book level. We need big, giant lines to know where the borders and boundaries are, just as we understand the picture that we're seeing. But as we start to color that in and we get more experience, we're like, oh, this is starting to not serve me anymore. I need more fidelity. I need more nuance. It's not really this or this. There's a big black line there. I'm supposed to have two separate colors, but they kind of bleed together. It's a little bit of both. And actually, it's a little bit more of this color than this color. And so as you move on the timeline of your understanding of yourself, I think that starts to emerge. And I guess I brought it up a little out of order, because I think that's where we're heading, is to understand that where you on the timeline matters for how you're learning and how you're outputting things.
Yeah. So is it okay if I just pin timeline for just a moment and go back to certainty and then jump over to timeline?
One of the things in my head is always going, what did we title this podcast? And somebody starts listening and then it ends up as a different topic. So I'm always trying to remember how we're packaging and titling this to make sure it doesn't confuse somebody listening. So that's actually why I brought it back to timeline. But you can do it anywhere you want. We'll just retitle it, whatever.
All right.
At the end.
Joel's job is to make sure Antonia stays on track and it doesn't talk over everybody's head. I just need a
title that's not 300 words to explain what we talked about. It's because they get shorter and shorter now with the smaller spaces, and I've got 4 words to work with.
Well,
help me, Antonia.
You can't title something.
I'm uncertain about my titling.
Well, you can't borrow certainty from me because I don't have it. Okay. So let's go back to that concept of certainty. As we mentioned, the 10-year-old or tertiary function is associated with an eternal child energy. And that means the one thing we can never let go of is a knee-jerk sense of uncertainty that is followed by a knee-jerk response of seeking certainty from the outside world, right? Because that's what kids do. It doesn't matter how good you are at your 10-year-old or tertiary function. You might feel like you are at this point a savant with it. You might think, I've had so many people tell me, I outclass people who have it as a dominant function. And I'm like, maybe. And usually that is the machismo of the eternal child bragging about it, because that's another way that we make up for our uncertainty is by claiming things that are, basically an armchair quarterback style. Like we make these big claims like a kid would, it's like, I could do that, is a very 10-year-old or eternal child energy claim on something that we may or may not be able to do. And we haven't put ourselves to the test.
Yeah.
But as long as it just stays in our head, we can say anything we want to. So there's a sense of uncertainty or in our 10-year-old or tertiary that never goes away. But there is a maturation process that happens when we stop trying to borrow certainty from the outside world and bring that in-house by seeking certainty from our parent energy, which is something we've talked about in podcasts before. And I think particularly the self-love series, we talked about the eternal child and the parent energy. Okay, so now to move it to the 3-year-old or inferior function. And actually, in John's model, while our 10-year-old in the car model matches up beautifully with his eternal child framework, or the archetypal energy of the eternal child in his framework, we call the inferior function the 3-year-old function, and he calls it the anima or animus. So an anima or animus is the opposite gendered energy that lives inside all of us. And I think that it took me a while to sort of reconcile how maybe it was inappropriate to call it the 3-year-old function. But that's really where I realized the uncertainty comes in here as well. Like this is the bridge that ties both concepts together. Now, the reason why the anima or animus, anima, if you're a man, it's your feminine energy inside of you. And if you are a woman, it's the masculine energy inside of you.
So Jung talked about it.
Right, exactly. Not specifically the inferior function, but he did talk about the anima and the animus inside of us.
About the opposite energy.
Yeah, and he tied it to his own too, I would suspect. Like everybody says that Jung is a different personality type, but I suspect Jung had INTJ preferences, and I've talked with John Beebe about this too, and he thinks as well. And so I'm like, okay, so as long as me and John agree, I'm pulling on John a lot right now as for credibility, but I'm like,
see, 10 years ago, you wouldn't have done this. You would have been like, this is how it works.
That's right.
You would have had definitive statement, like he was an INTJ. Done. And gone on.
That's right.
But now you're like, well, and I kind of talked to John and like that's where we're at now.
Well, because I've not met Carl Jung, nor will I ever. So I can't really assert a specific personality type and say he absolutely was. But I think the nail on the coffin for his type for me was reading the Red Book and his passage on his anima, which is Salome. Salome, who has a very ESFP energy, right? She danced and she moved and she was sensual, and there was like all the sensing, feeling part, in there, a lot of that language. And it was a very extroverted sensing sort of, basically it was a dream that he was talking about. And so he was talking about this being his anima that he was integrating. And I'm like, that kind of, I don't know, that helped me sort of go, if I place him there with INTJ preferences, I feel pretty good about that considering all his other work. So all of that said, the concept of it being an anima or animus basically boils down to you're never gonna know what it's like to actually be the opposite gender. You just, like, as a woman, I just do not know what it's like to be a man. I just don't. I can learn as much as possible. I can sympathize. I can live with a man and watch his experience day in, day out.
Dump hormones in your own body.
I could
flood yourself with testosterone.
I could fill myself with testosterone. I could live as a man. I could do all sorts of things. But the actual experience of growing up and actually living as a man, as a woman who I identify as a woman, I'm just not going to know that experience. Now, I know that this goes into a lot of political realms, and I'm not speaking to the anomaly. Okay. I'm not speaking to the exceptions. I'm not speaking to, situations where a person maybe is hermaphroditic, or like there's a lot of other things where you're like, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? It's like, okay, there's always an exception to a rule.
Yeah.
But the overwhelming majority of people who identify as the sex that they were born as will just never know what it's like to be the opposite gender. But we have that energy inside of us anyway, right? There is a part of us that is associated with that. So when I say uncertainty, I mean like you just can't know. You just can't know. Okay, so now bring it over to the 3-year-old function, or how we call it, the 3-year-old. The number one thing that, or not number one, but one of the defining characteristics of a baby is how reliant they are on the outside world to take care of them, right? That's kind of the point.
Yeah.
And so a baby is uncertain about everything. They're uncertain about everything, right? Like, and when they start to walk or crawl, they get a little zoomy and they'll round a corner and start falling down steps if you don't have a gate up. So I'm not saying that they're uncertain about, like basic movements. But if a balloon pops around them, they immediately start crying. They don't know what to do about that.
Yeah.
If something scary, like if somebody comes up and says boo, they might cry or laugh, right? There's a lot of situations where babies just start to cry, and you have to interpret what's going on with them. If they're hungry, they don't know how to go get them their own food. Yeah. If they're tired, they might fall asleep. But if something keeps them up, they don't know how to look at somebody and go like, listen, I'm trying to get some sleep. Okay, can you back off here? They don't know how to navigate in those ways. There is deep uncertainty, which requires the outside world to basically subsidize all of that by taking care of them. So the bridge in the middle is that sense of just underlying uncertainty about everything, right? I just don't know. I'm just not sure. So how does one integrate this part of you if you're always uncertain? Now, unlike the eternal child energy, which is looking to the outside world to soothe its uncertainty, what it's really trying to do, the eternal child, the 10-year-old or tertiary function, is it's trying to borrow certainty, right? It's like, hey, if you feel certain about this, I'll feel certain about this. So the challenge with the inferior or 3-year-old function is that it's part of what John calls the axis of relating to self, meaning that it can't borrow certainty from the outside world. It's not even looking to others to calm it down. It believes it's an inside job. It doesn't think that certainty can be borrowed. So you're in this extremely uncertain place inside of yourself, and you can't borrow it from the outside world. It has to be on your shoulders. So what do you do about aspects of yourself in that case? And the answer is you get used to it. That's it. That's all you can do. All you can do is get used to feeling uncertain. And not let the uncertainty stop you, not let it throttle you, not go, oh, I'm feeling uncertain, I shouldn't do it. You go, okay, if I'm feeling uncertain in any aspect that's my inferior or 3-year-old function, my phrase now is like, that's just Tuesday.
Yeah.
That's just Tuesday. Okay. Like I'm going to feel uncertain in my introverted sensing or memory all the time. I just am. Don't worry, I'll get to timeline in a second. I just want to lay this track first. I know you're getting really antsy.
No, I'm good.
Okay. I can just see you bring it back to timeline.
I was just going to insert here at this point in the conversation, the reason why this is so powerful and important is we know the inferior, the 3-year-old, the animus energy, is the gateway to all the shadow material that you have coming for you in midlife and later. And so if you don't make peace with this or integrate it, you're going to have to do that before you can go into shadow work at midlife.
Yep.
So one of the things a young person could do, again, I'm always trying to find access points. What can I do with this information, Antonia and Joel? Well, you can begin to make peace with that uncertainty now in preparation for the shadow work that's coming if you're a young person. If you're in midlife or older, you can start to do that work now for uncertainty to begin to unlock the shadow material for yourself. It can be done in tandem, but that's a really big key to the shadow work that's coming.
Yes. In fact, sometimes I, in my head, imagine that my inferior function of introverted sensing or memory is a toll taker. There's a toll booth and a bridge that goes into shadow content, into the unconscious. And I imagine my introverted sensing or memory as a toll taker that says the price of the toll to cross the bridge into the shadow is uncertainty. You're paying it. You're like paying a willingness to feel uncertain. That's your toll. And if you're willing to feel uncertain, then now you can enter shadow material, because the point of the shadow material is that you just don't know, right? It's all question marks. That's the point of it. The shadow is basically another way of saying your unconscious mind, and your unconscious mind has to get to that material in sideways, side doors, like reflected back in conversations and experiences. Like it's no easy thing. So you can't even get to shadow material unless you're willing to feel uncertain and have things reflected back to you that you don't like. You're like, you wish weren't true.
Which that 3-year-old inferior is it's kind of like our breath. We have access to our unconscious mind through an automatic system, which is our breath. We normally don't think about breathing, but we can take conscious control of our breath, which gives us access to our unconscious mind, because it's one of the few unconscious things that we can take conscious control of. And in a similar way, not exactly, but I'm trying to draw a parallel here. The inferior is the closest access we have to the shadow that we can sort of see. It's really uncertain and murky territory. We don't really like it, but it gives us an ability to, like breath, tune into something that's a little more unconscious through a conscious aspect. Like through the conscious attunement to it, we can now start to see things that are unconscious because we have a relationship to this part of ourselves, I guess is what I'll say.
Yep.
And so I think that's really important. And it's why it's so powerful to be able to integrate the 3-year-old or inferior process.
That's right. Exactly. It's the key to the whole enchilada, right? Of getting to what Jung calls whole self. It's like, if we can do it with our inferior, we can do it with all the other stuff, right? And it proves it to ourselves. Now, to go back to that question of like, well, what if you're using it a lot? And what if you've gotten skilled in it? What if you're really good at it? So my observation has been, and this is from watching people, coaching people, but also particularly in the last couple of years, going through the Personality Life Path program.
Yeah.
I've seen this over and over and over and over again in Personality Life Path, which we call PLP. I'll just call Personality Life Path PLP from this point on, because that's what you and I call it. In PLP, I've seen it over and over and over again in like sort of rapid iteration, a pattern that I saw in my clients 10 years before that I was working with one-to-one. And that is, we find a couple of different elements of our 3-year-old or inferior function that we have gained some comfort with. And then we go, I've integrated the inferior, right? So
put all the chips on 7.
That's right.
Like all the red chips on 7. I'm betting on this one.
Yeah. So I do that. I totally do that, right? Like I do introverted sensing or memory, and I'll name all the different ways that I'm doing that.
Scrapbook or whatever.
Yeah. I'm scrapbooking, or like I've got a routine, or, you know, like
like an INTJ would say, like, I'm really into activities. Like I go rock climbing and bike riding and swimming. So clearly I've integrated extroverted sensing.
Right. Or
sensation.
Like an EFJ will be like, no, I've got all these, you know, I'm an encyclopedia in my field, which is very common, right?
Like 16 diplomas on my wall.
That's right. Or
look how much I know. Yeah.
Or an IFP will be like, I get a lot of stuff done. Like I get things done all the time. You know, I've accomplished these big things. I think about my, Dan Dodge, who's been on our podcast multiple times. He, with his extroverted thinking or effectiveness, 3-year-old or inferior, somehow manages to completely organize and implement through hikes of thousands of miles, right? And like he sets up, you know, hiking boots at various parts of the trail that he's going to need, you know, those, the like new gear, because he anticipates that that's about the time that his gear is going to start, you know, falling apart, and he figures all this out. And I mean, that's complicated. It's like 9 months worth of setting things up, and he makes it happen. So it's there are a lot of different examples of people doing pretty impressive things with their 3-year-old or inferior function, but it's usually a couple of things we do, and we do those well. It's almost always the aspects of our inferior 3-year-old that we're not doing, that we're not even touching, because it's so uncertain, because it makes us feel so uncertain, that is the key to actually integrating it. In the same way, it's like, you know, like I remember one time talking to a friend of mine going like, I started taking up running at the time. And I probably said this on the podcast before because it always stands out in my head. I was like, running is really hard. I was like, especially me, right? Because I'm built like a dwarf, you know, short and kind of squat. And what does Gimli say? You know, like dwarves are natural sprinters, very dangerous over short distances, but not marathoners. And I remember thinking, man, like these long runs, these are tough. And my friend went, yeah, well, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's the thing about the inferior function. When we talk about like integrating it and, having it be difficult, it's like, yeah, well, if it was easy, everybody would be integrating their inferior. And it's because it's such a challenge, and it's almost always the work you're avoiding, right? Yeah. It's like the stuff you're not doing. And so a piece of this too is recognizing the breadth of each function, particularly one's own inferior or 3-year-old.
Which is hard to do because you're not going to be sophisticated at this. You're going to be uncertain. So it'd be hard to tune into all the breadth of it. Like you just don't get it. I just don't get it. My inferior 3-year-old, I just don't understand it to the level that somebody who uses it as a strength understands it.
Yeah, because they're going to have found all the opportunities to use it.
Yeah.
Like every time it could be used in a context, they've done that, right? Because we feel so certain with it as a tool, we're bringing it to everything. So I know every single way extroverted intuition or exploration can be used.
You've made every possible mistake you can make up to this point. Like you got more to make, but you've made a lot.
I've made so many mistakes with it. Go ahead.
You haven't made as many mistakes in your 3-year-old though. Weirdly enough, you would think we make tons of mistakes in our lesser functions, but we actually haven't. That's why we're uncertain. Mm-hmm. We haven't tested it as much. Mm-hmm. We haven't tried as many things.
Yeah.
We actually don't have as much experience there. I was thinking about our daughter, Piper. We were at an amusement park this past week because we were going to a family event, and we suspect she has ESFP preferences. She's 12 years old, and it was weird to see her. It's weird how clumsy she is.
Yeah.
With what I suspect is ESFP preferences, leading with the sensation, extroverted sensing as a driver dominant function. I'm like, why is this girl so clumsy? It's because she's so certain she's taking way more risks than other people do. Mm-hmm. And so she's making all the mistakes at the age of 12, 10, not 8. Like she bumped the other day at the music park, she just bumped her head yet again. We had to get like the EMT person to get ice and the whole thing, and we'd leave early. I'm like, how does she keep running into stuff with her forehead? Shouldn't this be a strength for her? Shouldn't she be better at this if she has sensation or extroverted sensing as her driver or dominant function? And I was reflecting on the drive home thinking, no, that actually makes a lot of sense because the very thing we're talking about here. On the timeline of her life, this is the time when she should be overusing that dominant driver function. She's testing everything, taking wild risks with it. She's flailing with her, like she's not being careful. She's not cautious. She's just attempting things, sees it and acts for it.
Yeah.
And then she calibrates and she's learning a lot. She's like really understanding her body and her physicality and all of this. And I think that's what we do when we're young. So by the time she's my age, all those lessons have been made by that point. Like she'll have so much to understand about her physicality and her body. The certainty is only going to keep going up, I think, in her use of it.
Yeah. Did you ever break a bone growing up?
No.
I never did either. Not once.
My brother did. Extroverted sensing, dominant driver. Again, sensation.
Broke
multiple bones.
Every ESP I know has broken bones growing up.
I didn't snowboard off the roof like my brother. Well, I don't know why he thought that was a good idea. Of course, I told him to do it.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, you should go snowboard off the roof and I'll videotape it. I'll SI preserve this forever.
That's right.
I was always the one getting him hurt because I would suggest it. It was a great idea. And then he would go and do it.
Well, and to be fair, I'm not saying that like every ESP is, an adrenaline junkie or wants to snowboard off of a roof or whatever. But every ESP I know has taken risks that I didn't take.
Absolutely.
Because I didn't have the confidence for it. I didn't have the certainty around it. So there's an uncertainty that lives in our 3-year-old inferior that basically is a lifetime of work of digging out all the ways that we could be using this, but we're throttling ourselves because we're uncertain.
Yeah.
And like you said, when it's a driver or dominant function, we're using it in every way it can be used because we're trying to figure out like, this is our go-to tool. So we're going to use it however we possibly can. So it's good to remember that because it's not just a matter of getting skill in our 3-year-old or inferior. Yeah. We're not just trying to build skill in it. We're trying to build breadth of integration. We're trying to find all the ways that it can be integrated into particularly our first function. So the relationship, just like the healthiest relationship we can build with our co-pilot 10-year-old or auxiliary tertiary, or like the parent child, is to, when the child function, when that 10-year-old or tertiary function becomes uncertain, is to seek certainty, not from outside factors, but from our own inner parent, right? Our co-pilot auxiliary function.
Yeah.
That's the best relationship we can build. That's the healthiest one. Because then we're not avoiding it. We're not seeking coping mechanisms. We're not saying, well, I never liked you guys anyway, or whatever, right? We're not disregarding it. We're not overly seeking other people's head pats and going, I've been a good girl or whatever. Like, we're bringing it all in-house, and we're creating confidence and certainty through our own inner resources.
Yes.
So for the inferior function and the dominant function, or a 3-year-old and a driver in the car model, the best way to integrate that part of ourselves, or to quote unquote deal with the uncertainty of it, is to find ways that it works in conjunction with our driver or dominant function, and then borrow the certainty from that part of ourselves.
Yes.
So if we can do that, now we can make peace with the uncertainty, because we have this other part of ourselves that is quite certain, right? And it's like, no, it's going to be okay.
This is the entire reason we produce these owner's manuals for personality type, one of 16 types. So if you're listening or watching right now, what Antonia's talking about, that's what the owner's manual goes through. Like, the owner's manual course helps you balance the parent energy with the child energy, helps you tune into the driver to help support the inferior 3-year-old. So I just want to mention that, because we're dialing in the work that needs to be done for the person that's listening or watching right now. If you really want to go down this road, an owner's manual could take you down this road in a very proactive, linear fashion. Like, you can walk through this and set up your life ergonomically to take care of these things, and actually design your life that works with you, not against you, right? That actually works to accommodate for the uncertainty you have in the 3-year-old, helps balance the eternal child energy. Like, it's doable, it's direct, it's not rocket science. It takes a little bit of effort, but it's very available to everyone.
Yeah.
I just want to be encouraging that this isn't terribly complex. It's pretty straightforward. You have to do some things you feel a little out of your comfort zone potentially, but it's very doable and very accessible to most people, or everybody, really.
Yeah, exactly. And so, so to go back to and I don't know where we're going to end up calling this, but I'm going to go back to timelines, because I promised you. I don't know where we're at in actual time and length of podcast, but because you said it was about timelines, we'll see if we can get
title it
back
whatever you want, but it just has to make sense.
Okay.
So you tell me what you want to title it.
I'm sure we won't title it timelines, but I'll give a nod to that. So where should we be at? Well, when we're young, so our number one piece of advice on the podcast has always been develop the co-pilot. And the reason why, and we've said this ad nauseum a million times, is most people need more of whatever their auxiliary function is in their life to make sure that they're consulting all the adult parts of themselves. Most of us need more of that. And particularly when we're in our 20s and 30s, I think that we spend even though it comes online, quote unquote, it theoretically comes online, this function does in our teens, as in we start to get really fascinated by it. As teenagers, we find ourselves not just relying on our first function. We find ourselves really kind of starting to explore that second function a lot. But I think that we develop it and make it an important aspect of who we are in our 30s. I think our 30s, because we've made enough mistakes in our 20s that now we have to play cleanup in our 30s.
Yes.
As a general rule. Not everybody, but our 20s are oh, maybe I should get on this, right? Yeah. Or after the mistakes of our 20s.
We burn out our eternal child in our 20s, quite frankly.
Right.
I mean, by the time I'm 30, I'm okay, I can't be a kid anymore. I got to grow up.
Yep.
And so I tune to the adult part of me for self-parenting.
That's right.
I mean, that's really what happens.
That's
and around 32, it happened for me.
Yes, exactly. So if you want to if you're younger, if you're in your 20s, teens, 20s, or whatever, if you really want to accelerate your maturity and do some personal development, figure out every way that you can leverage your auxiliary or co-pilot function, right? And it's really self-parenting work that you're doing. You're bringing approval in-house. You're bringing judgment in-house. Even if their second function isn't a judging function, you're understanding discretion around it. You're really bringing it to a place where you're now the adult in your life. So that's why we always say it, because it's a leverage point. And there are people who, are live and die never having really truly seasoned that part of themselves.
And then we know that in midlife, we have availability to work on the shadow and continually pursue whole self as one of the endeavors that we have in a lifetime. So I think it's really what happens is different opportunities open up to us as we mature. And I think you're right that a young person that focuses right now in their 20s on self-parenting, it's almost like we never stop needing a parent. We just need to transition from our actual real parent to self-parent. We always need something parenting us. And if we don't do that self-parenting responsible grab, it's like life's waiting for us to do that. We're going to have kind of like an immature experience of it all until we have that moment.
Yeah. And I think the more difficult a relationship we had with our own parents, the harder it is, actually, weirdly enough, even though we need that self-parenting more, the harder it is for us to do because we didn't have a great model.
Yeah.
And so we have to figure out how to model self-parenting. And we just did a whole series on self-parenting, using different functions. So I recommend going and checking those out. So in our 30s, we really have an opportunity to develop that auxiliary function or parental function in a whole new way, like in a really robust, like you're talking about, self-parenting way. When you mentioned in our 40s, we can get to the shadow, but it's important to remember that getting to the shadow is actually figuring out how to make peace with uncertainty in our inferior. I mean, that's really the key. The key is you can't get to shadow work until you've started to integrate your inferior function. And that means you don't just build skill in certain ways that you figured out. It means that you sit with all the ways in which you haven't figured out your inferior function and you make peace with how uncomfortable that makes you feel.
So we go back to the INJ you talked about earlier. Extrovert, sensing, sensation, inferior. Maybe they're into high octane sports, mountain climbing, rock climbing, swimming, running, bike riding, even maybe like basketballs type sports. Mm-hmm. And so they're like, I got this. But then you say, actually, what I want you to do is I want you to get up on that stage in 5 minutes and give an impromptu talk.
Yep.
Just from the energy you have and the attunement you have.
Yes.
If the person that could do all those high octane things says, oh, that makes me feel a little nervous, uncertain. I don't know if I'll have the right information, or I don't know if I have the energy to do that, or I might mess up on that. That would be something that maybe they would feel in that scenario that would be like they wouldn't realize about themselves until they're presented with that opportunity. As just an example, randomly. Like you might be, basically the point I'm trying to say is you might be doing a lot of high octane skill in this area, but if we just presented one piece of material outside of that framework you're used to, you start to feel uncertain of it, that's where the work is.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Making peace with that uncertainty.
Yeah. In the case of somebody with INJ preferences, that's like, it would be what they would feel is leaping before you look.
Yes.
It's being present enough and it's trusting yourself enough to make to be thrown into a situation you couldn't possibly prepare or plan for and still navigate your way through like an ESP would.
Even in the midst of feeling uncertain the entire time. Because you're going to feel uncertain the entire time.
Well, and even messing up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing is that the reason why we feel uncertain, I mean, the uncertainty itself actually increases our likelihood of messing up and making the wrong choice. Because it's the implications. Yeah. What is it? If I mess up now, that might ruin opportunities down the road. It might make people think less of me. Mm-hmm. I might think less of myself. Like, I think the uncertainty is just in the moment, but it's also the implications of the future. What does this mean for me? The meaning I apply to the uncertainty. So it only makes it more complex. And being willing to remove the meaning.
Yes.
And what does it mean for my future implications? And being willing to take an action that you haven't fully thought through.
Yes.
Even though it might not actually be the right choice.
Yes.
It's still doing it, even when it feels off and wrong, and ends up being wrong. Right. Yeah. Like that's the thing. The risk you run is that you really are regressive when it comes to that function. And so making peace with the uncertainty is like, oh, I actually might make a terrible choice and it might actually be bad. But just like with our first function, we do that without hesitating. We do it without blinking. We make decisions and choices or take actions all the time that are not right for our first function, but we did it growing up. We did it when we were a kid, when we were supposed to make mistakes. Now we're an adult and now we're trying to do the same thing, but it's really hard to go back to that level of beginner's mind. It's really hard to go back to that place where it's like, no, and not only am I taking an action that I feel uncomfortable about, but it actually might end up being the wrong action. And now I've got to contend with that and not beat myself up and not go, I'll never do that again. We have to go, no, and I have to do that again.
Yeah.
Right. I have to keep doing it until I've made peace with all of the uncertainty of this. And only then we are paying the toll taker to get into shadow work.
Because the shadow is way worse than this.
Yeah.
The shadow is going to be way more uncomfortable than this part.
Well, the shadow is also slippery.
Yeah.
Right. We have to contend with the fact that the shadow has all sorts of material for us that it's not just difficult and hard. It's like legit an ego hit all the time. That's why we put it in the shadow. Like our ego's like, I don't want to contend with that. So I'm just going to shove it over there.
Yeah.
And we also see shadow functions as building skill in those as well, when it's really not about skill development there either. It's about being willing to go, yep, I'm always going to be bad at that. Or, yep, that's always going to be a struggle. And so I have to make peace with that. I have to make peace with, or it's actually reflecting back the worst parts of me, or at least what I think are the worst parts, even if nobody else thinks they are. I think they're the worst parts of me, and I have to sit with that. I can't distract myself. I can't seek outer world feedback that it's going to be okay. I can't create a coping mechanism. I can't say, well, screw you guys. I'm going to take my ball and go home.
I could project on a political party over there. I could do that. Maybe that would work. Teasing. I'm kidding.
Well, that's the coping mechanism, right?
I know.
And so it's like, no, I just have to sit in the quagmire that is all of this inconvenient and uncomfortable information.
Yeah.
And so, that's the moment of the timeline that we're ready, is when we can sit with the discomfort of all the things that our inferior 3-year-old function asks of us, and to do them even though we know that they might not be great, right? And it might actually be as bad as we feared. Now, 99.9% of the time, it's not.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it's not this terrible thing, because we don't realize how much we're throttling it. We don't realize how much of baby steps we're doing. We think we're doing this massive leap, but it's actually a tiny little baby step. And it feels like this leap for us, right? Because it's our 3-year-old or inferior, right? It's a place of massive uncertainty. So it feels like it's this huge thing, but it's actually usually a baby step, which is why it almost never leads to true disaster, but we're always worried that it will. And if it leads to even the mildest amount of wrong action, then we feel like we got our hand bit and we retract. And we got to do it again, and we got to do it again, and we got to do it again, and we got to do it in all these different aspects of that function. So one of the best gifts we can give ourselves is to learn every element of what it means to be in the energy of our inferior or 3-year-old function, to learn all of the aspects and to watch ourselves avoid and misdirect and not look at and kind of be like, well, that's not important, or I don't need to do that aspect. And that, if we're talking about timelines, that's the work of a lifetime.
Yeah.
Like we die before we get to the end of that one. And as we do that, though, we can find more and more opportunities to partner up with our first function to make it a little better. I think of not INJs, I think of ESPs that lead with extroverted sensing or sensation and have introverted intuition or perspectives as their 3-year-old or inferior. One of the biggest discomforts of that function is getting a little paranoid when your brain starts forming these patterns that you're not sure if you're seeing what you think you're seeing, right? And I know lots of ESPs that are actually pretty good with their introverted intuition, right? They can see longer timelines, they can understand implication, they can kind of get inside other people's heads. They're actually pretty, I mean, how many ESPs do I know that are like psychology majors?
They're good at framing, like framing things, like look at this way. Like I think they have a good knack for that often.
Yep. But then there's that moment when they're like unsure of what they think they're seeing.
Or the meaning of this in the future.
Or the meaning of this.
Or this can't really be a pattern. I mean, I can see all the exceptions because I'm looking right at the exception there. So I'm not going to really trust the pattern. Like it also happens for ESPs often.
Or what are other people thinking of me?
Yeah.
Right. What's going on? Like, how are they seeing me?
Yeah.
And so contending with all that feeling or that uncertainty around intuition by kicking it back up and asking extroverted sensing or sensation, yeah, but what am I experiencing?
Yeah.
Right. And it goes back and forth. And so it's like, what am I actually experiencing? What's the pattern? What am I experiencing? What's the pattern? And pretty soon those two things get to a place where they can work pretty well together. And it's like, don't sweat the small stuff. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill, right? Like don't see things that aren't actually there, but at the same time, understand that you're probably seeing something that isn't there, right? And kind of learning how those two things can rely on each other.
Yeah.
Or introverted sensing and extroverted intuition for ISJs. It's like, what are all the possible things that could go wrong? And it's like, well, what are all the things you've experienced in the past? Right. And so it's like, okay, so I guess the catastrophe could happen, but what are let's work the numbers here. What's the likelihood based on all the other times you've experienced something even close to similar?
And what do we know about humans and life and the universe, et cetera?
That's right. Like what does the past teach us about potential, future possibilities? So it's a matter of integrating those two functions. So it's not just a matter of using that function or gaining a skill. It's a matter of breadth of use and making peace with the uncertainty that comes with the breadth of use, and then figuring out a way to use it with our first function. This is what's called the transcendent function, actually, in Jungian psychology, is having these two work in cahoots with each other and transcend the capacities of both, right? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts, basically. And then when we get to that point, and that usually is work we do in our midlife, right? That's usually work we do in our 40s. Now we can start dipping into more shadow material or the unconscious, making peace with those things, understanding how those all operate, and then sort of spend the rest of our lives trying to master whole self.
So this is a little deeper episode because you're right now, Antonia, you're in the middle of preparing for your new course you're opening at the time of this recording called Personality Dynamics, which basically goes down into showing people how we do coaching and personality group work in like our personality life path mentorship. Like it's the teacher's notes. Mm-hmm. It's not available to anybody. It's only available to people that have gone through our profiler training because you have to kind of know what you're doing. This is pretty advanced material. We're talking about levels of energy with the functions. We're talking about like being able to spot them and the dynamics of them, and then spot them in real time in a coaching or facilitator framework, which is very complex because the theory breaks down quickly. People's real material comes in. So right now we're in the middle of creating that course. And so all this is in your head.
Yeah.
So just know that if you're like, well, I just tuned into this podcast and now I've never listened to you guys before. And what in the world? Like, where are you? Like, you're not talking about introversion versus extroversion. Where are you going with this? Well, you're doing a lot deeper concepts right now because you're preparing this class.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's not an apology. I think the people that listen frequently love both sides of it. I just want to make sure that somebody's new has an access point. We asked at the very beginning, if you look at the caramel of personality, the 10-year-old, 3-year-old, well, do they grow up? I mean, that was a real meta question I asked, a real basic question I asked at the beginning. It's yes and no.
Yes and no.
They grow up in capacity and scope and skill. Like you can mature there. But we've identified here on this show that you're never going to you're never going to outgrow your level of uncertainty in these. Yeah. So they're going to stay around 3 years old and 10 years old.
Yeah.
That's always going to be there.
The only thing you can do is teach them to borrow certainty from the more preferred functions. Yeah. And to build a good relationship with the entire polarity.
So if you see yourself building skill here, don't mistake that for the certainty that might be. That I think it's really what we're trying to say here is to understand that even if you have skill, there's still going to be parts of that are still uncertain. Even the skill you have might be uncertain.
Yeah.
It's really important you understand this as you work so you can have proper expectations because that's why it matters, right?
And to realize that even just in those first 4 functions, as far as I can see, we have a lifetime's worth of work.
Yeah.
Just in the first 4 functions. Like, honestly, our shadow functions come up to really actually the major purpose of the shadow functions is to give us an access point to unconscious material. And
deal with triggers, things that trigger us and make us feel awful.
Yep.
It really helps you get an understanding of that and why you feel the way you do.
Exactly.
And why that person over there drives me crazy.
Yeah.
And often that's a representative of somebody in your life over and over again that's driven you crazy, like different people embodying the same archetype for you. It usually has to do with your shadow.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's why it's so powerful.
Yeah. And if I could nuke one idea in the in the theoretical type sphere, if I could just nuke people thinking that you go to your literal shadow personality type when you go to your shadow, that would probably be it. Because I think that really does a disservice to using shadow functions as an access point to our, like you say, our triggers and the less conscious parts of who we are.
Yeah.
It's a tidy theoretical bypass to legit shadow work. So if I could like request that, every time you see somebody say that, just go, yeah, that's not how that works. and I say that as somebody how, like you mentioned before, in earlier times, I would say lots of stuff with certainty. Now I realize in retrospect, I'm like, I was pretty certain about that. And it may or may not work exactly like that.
Yeah.
But that's because I was in the space of theory. Now that we've been doing this for well over a decade. And I would say coaching has been the number one thing, but also in my own growth and development, watching these things actually play out on an operational level. Now I'm like, yes, if I'm going to say the theory itself, that is probably not an inappropriate way, like a very assertive way of saying the theory. But if I'm actually going to deal with reality and how it all plays out in reality, it's saying things with that much certainty usually doesn't really help that much.
I'm unclear. Are you saying that you go to your opposite type is what you would say it's a way to say it? Or are you saying in a general sense? I got a little confused.
Let me finish the thought.
Sure.
And then you won't. All of that said, I will say with certainty now, that's not how that works.
Gotcha.
Right. I was basically just trying to say, I recognize that I'm saying in a very certain way, in a very confident way, that is not how shadow functions work. Remembering that at the beginning of this episode, we were talking about how 10 years ago, we said things with so much confidence that now we'd hedge on. I'm going to say right now, with confidence, that's not how that works. I'm
There
not
you
going to
go.
hedge on it at all. And that's basically the reason why I'm saying
All
that.
right. Fair enough.
So if we just get rid of that idea, that would be awesome.
Cool. If you're listening along or watching along too, I think one of the best things you can do is to get started with your owner's manual for personality if you haven't done that yet. I think the two things I'd direct you to when you get the owner's manual for your personality, we have one for all 16 types. I would recommend you go to the ideal day exercise in the toolbox first, because it's really a good starting point to say, what kind of a day do I want to wake up to? How can I design my life ergonomically that's for my type? It's my life. I want to design it for my personality. I want to just like live for somebody else's personality or somebody else's life. I need this to kind of make sense to me. So I think the ideal day exercise. And then the next thing I think that you can focus on is the co-pilot, growing the co-pilot aspect of your personality. That's really from the CAR model. It's the auxiliary function. And it's something that is very accessible to you. It's something that you probably will enjoy growing after you get through the initial starting point of kind of just getting up and getting ramped up to it. It starts to give so many rewards. You start to feel better. It's really self-parenting is what we're talking about. You can now move through the world knowing how to direct your life. It's like the navigator or the self-parent for your life. It's so profound. And I mean, the owner's manual talks about so many more things, but just those two things alone are worth the course because it helps you focus in on making your life actually better in a very pragmatic daily experience, which if this doesn't impact your daily life, what's the point of it?
Yeah.
It could be fun to talk about, but can you imagine applying this and having a different experience for yourself? I think that's really what we encourage you to. So come over to personalityhacker.com, get an owner's manual for your type. If you already have one, we have other programs or products and events and all sorts of coaching availability for you if you want to go down deeper. Also leave a comment or share your opinion, or more importantly, share your story underneath this podcast. We'd love to hear from you over at personalityhacker.com. Make your voice heard. Let's get a conversation going around this idea of timelines, maturity, the 3-year-old inferior process. What's your experience like? I want to hear from you. Come over to Personality Hacker.
Yeah. And the person who left the comments about, being somebody with INTJ preferences and whether or not our 10-year-old and 3-year-old grow up. Thank you for helping launch sort of the idea around this. And I hope it didn't sound like I was picking on you. It was just the comments sparked a need to create some distinction around that. So thank you very much for leaving the comment and helping launch this conversation. And speaking of which, if you enjoy the podcast, you can let us know that by leaving a rating and review. The review is very important on Apple Podcasts. And I say this many times, but every once in a while, okay, so I'll say this. My extroverted feeling harmony, eternal child, 10-year-old has absolutely no idea if these podcasts mean anything to anybody. Because
you have deep uncertainty?
I do. I have deep uncertainty. And so while my introverted thinking or accuracy goes, no, it says, the parent in me goes, you're preserving your information and content for your own use. Meaning that like you have a body of work now, you've laid the tracks of all the thoughts that you were thinking throughout the entire time that you were thinking them, all the stuff you're working on. So it shouldn't matter if it's helping anybody else out.
Yeah.
It should just be a message in a bottle. And while my parent feels very satisfied with that answer, my eternal child still goes, yeah, but does anybody care? So every single review you leave on Apple Podcasts helps me know, it does actually matter. It's having an impact on people in the outside world. So if you'd be willing to leave one, my eternal child would be very grateful. I
just realized the title of this and my uncertainty around that is my extroverted thinking 10-year-old, along with my introverted sensing memory 3-year-old. I know that the title will be forever.
Yeah.
And I can't change it once it's set. And I have uncertainty of like, does that actually encapsulate what we talked about? Is that going to help somebody that's a new listener understand what we're saying? Is it going to be enough to get somebody to even click on it and be interested in it?
Can I create a tag around it?
Yeah. Can I create a tag or like, will this be good for search engine optimization if somebody's searching for this term?
Is this a good frame? All
these questions I'm asking in my extroverted thinking effectiveness. And then I kick it over to my memory and it's going to be forever. Do you feel comfortable with that? I'm like, oh God, it's forever. I really got to make sure I'm like careful about this. Like it could be, I don't know, like all these wild speculations.
Yeah.
Even though I can like track things, I have some skill built in my memory, but I'm still deeply uncertain in both of these backseat
Notice
functions.
how your 10-year-old has to say, I have some skill built in
right? But and I think the point of why we're doing this, showcasing from ourselves, is this is everybody all the time.
All the time.
You're never going to get rid of it. You're
Never.
Constantly like, wait, am I doing this right? Is this the way we're supposed to do it? And you'll do all these extra coping mechanisms like I am right now in order to get past it.
Yeah.
So now you've been warned. This is how it works.
This is how it works. Right here, all of this weirdness, all the weirdness. That's
all right.
how it works.
We got to wrap this blessing up.
I'm trying.
Okay, here we go. You have anything else to say before I wrap up?
Leave a rating review. We have a video podcast. You could be watching us on YouTube right now. You can leave a comment under that. And is there anything else I'm supposed to say?
Go get an owner's manual for your type.
Go get an owner's manual for your type.
All right, let's wrap it up.
Okay.
I'm Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast.